It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine because there are some damn good horror movies to fictionally paint the picture of how utterly devastatingly bleak living life in a post-apocalyptic wasteland would be. Whether it's a viral pandemic that has brought humanity to its knees or a landscape scorched by our bright burning sun, post-apocalyptic horror has traditionally been a slightly confused subgenre in the world of cinema, oftentimes being bogged down in science fiction and action thrillers without hitting the mark in its horror intention. Having said that though, although few, there are some post-apocalyptic horror films that really do live up to their namesake. Hello horror fans, what's going on, and once again welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, top 5 scary videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest apocalyptic horror films. Roll the clip. For the curious amongst you, that clip was from 2006 Children of Men, which is one of my favourite films of all time, but unfortunately I can't put it on this list because it isn't a horror movie. Sad times. But also it leads me to an interesting point because I've been tearing my hair out with this list on exactly what does or doesn't constitute apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic horror. Because of that, this list has certain parameters to it, the most glaring being that there are no zombie films on this list because, well, that's a top 5 list all to itself, which will be coming out very shortly, so be patient. And without further delay, let's begin. Kicking off at number 5, A Quiet Place 2018. Now you might be thinking it's a bit too early to be sticking this entry on our list, and while that's partly true, 2018's A Quiet Place is just a damn good film in its own right, and it deserves to stand out amongst some of the best post-apocalyptic horrors of recent times. And while compared to one particular recent Netflix horror that will remain unnamed, this one is far superior. Now, A Quiet Place took many risks in approaching the genre, and while some of them fell short, for the most part it paid off, and it wholeheartedly delivered on its most essential promise. It's a tense, bleak, atmospheric, and downright thrilling horror movie, and it does that in a truly captivating manner. A Quiet Place, written by Brian Woods and Scott Beck, and directed by John Krasinski in his Netflix debut feature film. Krasinski also happens to take the lead as Lee, the father of the Abbott family, survivors of an Earth ravaged by a horde of sightless extraterrestrial creatures that originated from a meteor shower that impacted Earth. These creatures, which are horrifying may I add, are hypersensitive to anything that makes noise, and so the few remaining humans on the planet have learned to tread very softly. A Quiet Place works because it manages to keep up the tension without ever letting any of the air out, and start to finish you are absorbed with the Lee family's plight. It does something very important for apocalyptic fiction. It gives us the space to actually want these characters to survive. Also, it's got some fantastic performances by Krasinski himself, as well as Emily Blunt and the awesome young Millicent Simmons. Great film. Swinging in at number 4, Time of the Wolf 2003.
Compassion? C'est vous qui parlez de compassion? Non, excuse-moi, je peux pas me payer ce luxe-là, il y en a assez de la compassion avec une seule flaque de sang dehors.
Now, this film is weird, but only weird in a very good sense, in the sense that it will make you feel incredibly uneasy start to finish, and you never quite shake the feeling that something is just off about 2003's Time of the Wolf. Also known as Le Temps de Loup in its native French, this film was written and directed by the awesome Michael Haneke, director of both versions of Funny Games, which if you haven't seen, you have to see, so you've been duly noted. The thing is though, Time of the Wolf may perhaps be misinterpreted as a non-horror in the traditional sense, because it doesn't rely on a terrifying virus that sweeps the planet or a horde of horrifying alien monsters, but instead on the fear that lies within society when it's stretched to its breaking point. It may be a little too artsy for some, and I'll admit this film isn't for everyone, but Time of the Wolf is one of the most unique and insightful interpretations of post-apocalyptic society in horror cinema. It tells the tale of the Laurent family who have fled Paris after an unnamed disaster as they venture to their house in the countryside only to find it already inhabited by survivors who are less than welcoming. As they descend into the madness that is human survival, the Laurents travel from pillar to post only to see society spiral further and further into an animalistic chaos. For the most part, this film is beautifully shot, but it only serves to counter the very bleak depiction of a very human apocalypse. Coming in at number 3, Carriers 2009. For some strange reason, 2009's Carrier's got a really bad rep when it saw its first theatrical release, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why. In fact, even the studio didn't believe it was worth releasing, and it only made it to theaters following Chris Pine's breakout role in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, you know, as a quick cash grab, as studios tend to do. But for the most part, that fails to give Carriers the credit it deserves as a genuinely gripping depiction of a global viral pandemic and the human disorder that follows. Written and directed by brothers Alex and David Pastor, Carriers serves to give a much more realistic and sober depiction of a zombie apocalypse, just without the zombies. The film stars Chris Pine as Brian, the de facto leader of a small group of survivors after the vast majority of the human population have been wiped out by a devastating airborne pathogen. Alongside his brother Danny, played by Lou Taylor Pucci, Brian's girlfriend Bobby and their school friend Kate, the group make their way to a picturesque beachside motel with the intention of restarting their life as the few survivors of mankind. Of course, this is an apocalyptic horror, so their journey there is far from sunshine and rainbows, but the small cast serves to highlight exactly how and why humanity can lose all semblance of itself when faced with ruin. Next up at number 2, It Comes at Night, 2017. Well guys, first and foremost, this film is absolutely awesome, and even if you're not particularly a fan of the post-apocalyptic genre, the intrinsic bare-bones simplicity of this film is sure to delight anyone in need of some horror-fueled content. On the surface, It Comes at Night seems to be an ostentatious, overly artistic movie with a few horror trappings to make up its skeleton, but please don't judge this film by its cover, because 2017's It Comes at Night is a start-to-finish, edge-of-your-seat, hold your breath, don't breathe, don't even look, what the hell is that thrill ride. I really don't want to spoil this film because although the ending frustrated quite a few people, I for one think it's definitely a worthy conclusion. If not perfectly fitting to a post-apocalyptic narrative, at the least. It Comes at Night tells a tale of Paul, played by the awesome Joel Edgerton, his wife Sarah and their teenage son Travis. They've managed to survive in their secluded country home in the deep woods after the rest of the world is being ravaged by a highly contagious viral outbreak. Paul's strict code of survival has kept them all alive, but that's before a young family stumbles upon their home, and that's when things get interesting. Honestly guys, I can't recommend this film enough. Yeah, it kind of unfairly got ripped on by critics, but as far as post-apocalyptic horror goes, this is definitely one of the best. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, The Road, 2009. Alright, I'll admit it, this one is 100% a personal bias, and you might be thinking, what the hell Jack, I wouldn't ever call The Road a horror movie. But bear with me, because this film is outside any conventional depiction of cinematic genre. It's equal parts horror, it's equal parts drama, it's equal parts the bleakest and most existential visual poetry you've ever seen in your life, but most of all, it's one of the most captivating post-apocalyptic tales of anything ever. And if you can't tell already, I'm incredibly fond of this particular little film. Written by Joe Penhall and directed by John Hillcoat, The Road is based upon the dark vision of Cormac McCarthy's 2006 novel of the same name, and if you haven't read that book, please stick it on your to-read list. But if I'm being honest, both the novel and the film are completely worthy of standing alone in their own right. Although there is a scene in the novel that is perhaps one of the grimmest things I've ever read. If you know, you know. I don't want to horrify you guys too much. The Road tells the tale of the man and the boy, father and son, survivors of a global cataclysmic event that has left the planet in post-apocalyptic ruin, as the two of them roam the wasteland, scavenging for food and shelter, barely clinging on to life and all the small joys that make them human. For me, The Road is the ultimate post-apocalyptic movie. It is the literal definition of a wasteland, both physically, socially and emotionally. But more than anything, this film takes my number 1 spot because although only a small ember, The Road still somehow manages to cling on to hope. If you ever find yourself in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, make sure to carry the fire. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 scariest apocalyptic horror movies. What do you guys think? What would make your list? Be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. Before we depart though, let's take a quick look at some of your more resounding remarks from over the past few days. First up, John Kopp says, you guys need to look into Canadian horror films. Canada has a serious dark side. And yes indeed John Kopp, I would definitely agree. Canada has some incredible horror movies, and don't you worry my good buddy, we're slowly making our way across the horror-fueled planet. Stay tuned. Well, on that note, horror fans, that's unfortunately all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you're a fan of this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button as well as that subscribe bell. We'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, please take it easy.